It's almost like we're living in some sort of Hollywood movie from, a DC Comics or something where, you've got Bane out there wreaking havoc in the city, and it's just turning into absolute madness in some areas.
Some guy with a weird accent and a mask hoarding all the toilet paper.
Bringing you law, gospel, and guns. This is Armed Lutheran Radio.
Hi folks, welcome to another edition of Armed Lutheran Radio, a show about guns, hunting, competitive shooting, the natural right of self-defense, and what God's Word says about the issues surrounding gun rights and gun ownership. I am your host, Lloyd Bailey, brimming with natural immunity, the Armed Lutheran, and this is episode number 302. Thank you all so much for making Armed Lutheran Radio a part of your week again this week. For those of you who are new, welcome aboard. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you'll stick around. I hope you enjoy what you hear today, and you'll come back for more next week. Maybe check out the 301 previous episodes that we've got. We've been doing this is our 7th year, and going strong. And today we have a variety show for you. And for those of you who are new, who don't know what that means, we have some awesome content provided by our entire cast: Mia Anstein, Pastor John Bennett, and Sergeant Bill Sylvia. But before we begin, I do want to thank those who make this show possible, the members of the Reformation Gun Club. Today, a special shout out going out to Brian from Riverton, Wyoming, Scott from Granville, Ohio, Ron from Lexington Park, Maryland, Matthew from Nixa, Missouri, Luke from Seymour, Indiana, Catherine from Casper, Wyoming, and our newest member, Curtis from Junction City, Kansas. Thank you all so much for your support. Armed Lutheran Radio is listener funded, and that means we don't have any advertising. We don't have any sponsors. We rely on the generosity of the men and women who are members of the Reformation Gun Club. Their monthly and annual contributions help keep this show going. If you would like to find out more about the benefits of becoming a member of the Reformation Gun Club, find out about all of the hundreds of hours of exclusive content that is available, check out armedlutheran.us/gun club, or look for a link in the show notes for this or any of our previous episodes. Membership starts at $15.17 per year. Those of you who are Lutherans will understand that little inside joke. But we hope you will join us and help keep the show going and take advantage of all the awesome benefits, one of which, by the way, is going to be coming next week, and we'll get to that in just a minute. Today, as I said, is our variety show. We have tips from Mia, who is, thank goodness, she is back with us. She's been dealing with some family issues, and so keep her and her family in your prayers. But we're blessed to have her back with us this week. We have a new pontification from Pastor Bennett. And with ammo being a bit expensive still, and lots of people relying almost exclusively on dry fire training at the moment, we're going back to the grooveyard of forgotten favorites, to a Ballistic Minute from episode 64, where Sergeant Bill shares some tips for making your dry fire training a little more challenging. Bill could not be with us this week, and hopefully will be able to join us next week for episode 303, which is going to be our next online hangout. Members of the Reformation Gun Club and the cast join me to shoot the breeze, talk about the news of the day, and whatever comes to mind. Those get-togethers are always fun, and we would love to have you join us. So watch for an announcement and more details on that coming this week. I'm also excited, really excited to announce, for those of you who remember, we released 2 years ago, at the end of 2019, we released a book called Duty to Defend. It was It really is something I'm extremely proud of. The subtitle is Defending God's Word from Those Who Misuse It in the Gun Rights Debate. It is a collection of articles from Lutheran pastors from around the country who take Bible verses that are commonly and sometimes uncommonly misused in the gun rights debate, and they put those verses in proper context and explain to you why or why they are not a good fit in the gun rights debate. Well, I am excited to announce that a second edition of Duty to Defend is in the works, and I've enlisted the help of some awesome pastors like Willie Grills, Greg Newman, Brian Flamme, Daniel Freeman, George McCall, and Philip Zielinski, plus some new submissions from Clint Stark and our own John Bennett, who were contributors to the first edition of the book. And they're going to help us flesh out 9 new verses in addition to the original 21 from the first book, plus a chapter about from Pastor Bennett about kind of an introduction to a biblical gun rights advocacy, and an article about the 3 estates, which is based on my interview with Pastor Brian Wolfmueller, and an article about a Christian view of gun-free zones, which is based on my interview with my former pastor, Ralph Abernathy. And so it's going to be epic. It's going to be the mother of all biblical gun rights apologetics books, as we take 30 Bible verses plus those additional chapters that I mentioned, and we put them in proper context. We explain why they work or don't work the way they're often presented by the anti and sometimes pro-gun Christian community, gun owner community. Look for that in the fourth quarter this year. Lent coming up, of course, is slowing things down a little bit, and we're allowing for that, of course. I expect to get started on the editing process sometime in the mid-spring, early summer, and then hopefully we will have that ready for you just in time for gift-giving season this year. So I'm really excited about that. Also, if you missed it, I was honored to be a guest on the Second Amendment Foundation's weekly Bullet program, which is hosted by Paul Lathrop. We talked about a bunch of gun policy news from around the country, including, I think it's Washington State's ban on high-capacity magazines. We talked about background checks, a proposed fee on background checks to help pay for gun violence research at the CDC, and a whole lot more. It was an awesome time, and because one of the guests' microphone was causing some problems, I talked an inordinate amount. That may be a good thing or a bad thing, but so go look for that. Search for the Second Amendment Foundation or Weekly Bullet on YouTube, or you can find a link in the show notes for this episode number 302. And give that a watch and a listen. All right, that's all I've got this week. It's time to turn it over to our awesome cast, Mia Anstein, Pastor John Bennett, and Sergeant Bill Sylvia. Sit back and enjoy the rest of the show, and I will see you again next week for episode number 303 for our next online hangout.
Time now for Mia's Motivations with Mia Anstein.
Hey guys, it's Mia here. It has been a while. I have been super swamped and busy, and I feel like I need to apologize to you all about not being here on the regular like I'm supposed to be. But I wanted to give you a little backstory. It's always busy in my life, but we've also had some medical issues with a family member, and it just seems like the devil is attacking every time I turn around. So I am trying to battle my way through that and still stand up and speak up and try to defend our freedoms and so on and so forth. And so I do apologize for my neglect at checking in with you all. And I hope that you all are doing well. I know there's a ton of negativity in the world right now, and hopefully we can all overcome that. But I wanted to know if anyone is training still with your firearms, and now that I think ammunition is kind of more readily available, at least where I am, it seems as though the stuff I've been looking for has been, and the stuff we reload, we've been doing okay with that. But hopefully you all are doing well. Today I came across an article a couple days ago, and I wanted to discuss it with you because it's something that we all have our firearms to defend ourselves. And this was an article that I read in Ammo Land. I don't know if any of you guys follow them, but this one, it talks about a woman stops an attempted rape. And in the story, I'll read you this story real quickly. And then in this article, they kind of go back and they talk about pluses and minuses of what happened. But I want you to put yourself in this woman's shoes and think about what she did and didn't do correctly. The story begins. It is well before dawn on a weekday. You're jolted from sleep by the sound of breaking wood. You hear somebody moving through your house. Your ex-boyfriend comes into your bedroom and tries to tear off your night clothes without your permission. You fight him off. Then your child hears the yelling and comes into your bedroom. Your ex-boyfriend leads the child back out and puts the child back in their room. You grab your handgun and wait. When your ex comes back, you tell him to leave, and he moves towards you. You shoot him. He reaches for your gun, and you shoot him again. Now your ex-boyfriend grabs your gun and runs away. You drive to the police station and you talk to officers at the desk. You give him a description of your ex-boyfriend. The police find him at the hospital with a gunshot wound in each leg. Your ex-boyfriend is arrested for theft of a firearm, home invasion, false imprisonment, violation of protective orders, attempted second-degree rape, criminal damage to property, and battery of a dating partner with child endangerment. You are not charged with the crime, but the police are holding your gun as evidence. Now, the author goes on to talk about issues that happen in this story, and I will have Lloyd include a link to the article in the show notes so that you can kind of see the comments. Right away, when I was reading this, what came to mind is one of my aunts. She lives in a very rural area. There's not cell phone coverage there. She does have a landline, but it is in and out quite often. She is in her 80s, and she is one of the women who empowered me as a youngster. She's very independent. She's lived out in basically the boonies, very far from the little town that we lived nearby. And she had a young lady live with her when I was yet a child, and this young lady is my age now. But when I was a kid, she had this young lady move in with her, and her father had killed her mother. So this is how I met the friend. And just recently, just before the holidays, last fall, this man showed up at my aunt's house, drove up the driveway. She had not seen him in some 20 or 30 years. Shows up at her door, and she is yelling through the door, "What do you want? What do you want?" Because she knew exactly who he was, and he's a murderer. So she did discuss the situation with me afterward, and she talked about shooting him in the knee. And it's something that we've talked about in so many episodes, but if you're going to pull the gun out, and I had to explain that to her, if you're going to pull the gun out in self-defense, first of all, she did very good. Don't open the door. And she has a huge guard dog. I mean, he's her buddy. He's her defender. So she does have that. But this man hasn't come back, and I'm hoping that he doesn't, because what I thought when I read this little story is the woman had filed charges against her boyfriend and put a restraining order, but there's this battered woman syndrome, and she still loves him. And she's probably still is hoping that even though she had the restraining order, maybe she was hoping that he would get better. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what the story of this is, but she had time to go get her gun while this man had her child unattended, unsupervised. I just think about maybe what would you do in that situation? Because I would have handled it very much differently, having that person walking my child, I don't know how old the child is, but walking my child back to their room after they just tried to attack me. It's something that when we're training, if you're going to pull that gun, you've got to aim it properly. You've got to practice. You've got to focus. It has to be muscle memory. And I'm not going to read you all the scenarios that this person put in there, but I am going to read some bullet points. These are important points to consider in your plan when you're going to defend your life. And these details, he says, that fit your family and house will be particular to you and the time that you have to respond. So here we go. You hear an alarm or a crashing sound that could be the breaking of wood or shattering glass. Grab your gun and your phone. Turn on the lights or grab your flashlight. Move so that you are between your child and the intruder. Get to the top of the stairs or behind a corner so that you are not a target. Move yourself and your children to a safe room or a secondary exit. Call 911 for help. Shout that you have called the police and that you are armed. Let that intruder know. Shoot the intruder if they advance toward you. Aim to the high center of the chest if they come closer, then aim to the triangle between the eyes and the bottom of the nose. Shoot until the threat stops. It already told you to call 911 for help, but here at the end, the last bullet point says, call 911 and ask for help. Hopefully you already had 911 on the phone through all of this. But this is something that you have to prepare for. And I hope that you can go and read this article by Rob Morse on AmmoLand and develop a plan for yourself and your family so that you are safe if something like this were to happen in your home. I hope that you're all doing well, and I will do better to come and say hi. It is great to kind of share some news and tips and information with you. Have a great one. Bye, guys.
You can read more from Mia, watch her YouTube videos, or check out her podcast, Mac Outdoors with Mia and Leah, at miaandstein.com. Time now for another Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill Sylvia.
Hey, I'm Sergeant Bill, and this is your Ballistic Minute. Today we're going to talk about some more dry fire, or what I like to call advanced dry fire. Okay, so maybe you've been doing your regular draws and reloads and shot, one shot to target, or 6 reload 6, or whatever your usual dry fire routine is, and maybe it's getting a little stale, or you want to just change it up a little bit. Here's something that I've been doing lately to kind of change it up and make it a little more interesting. One of the things I've been doing is I've been taking all of my drills that I run and I'm doing them moving. So I like to start out with the first 6 or 7 drills out of Steve Anderson's Refinement Repetition, and the first few are draw to a target, close targets, 10-yard targets, whatever it may be. So instead of standing stationary and doing a draw to a target to the front sight focus, I'm drawing and taking a step at the same time. Now I'm drawing and taking a step with both left foot and sometimes with the right foot, and sometimes taking a forward step, sometimes side step, or even a backward step. I actually do it in a box, so first draw will be 1 step forward. Second draw will be 1 step to the right. Next draw will be a step back. And the fourth draw will be a step to the left, right? I don't know. Complete the box, depending on which direction you went. Now you can do the moving stuff on reloads as well. I don't do this with like a dry fire magazine in the gun. I just have an empty magazine well, and I'll take a step and reload at the same time as I'm taking a step or two, so that I get used to doing move and reloads. Another thing you can do to kind of advance your dry fire, make it a little bit more difficult, is use smaller targets. You can either get actual smaller targets, smaller scale size targets, or what I'll do is if I'm doing, say, a six reload six, where you draw and do 2 shots each on 3 targets, and then do a reload and then 2 more shots on each of those 2 targets, instead of using the down 0 or A zone in the body, I'll use headshots only. So that's a smaller target. Another thing you can do is, like I like to shoot Glocks. Most of my competition stuff, I shoot a Glock 34, but I'll use a smaller gun, my Glock 19. It's a little bit less of a grip to hold on to. Almost all the controls are exactly the same. The magazine's a little bit smaller, so it's really almost identical. But because of the smaller grip and the smaller, shorter magazines, it just kind of slightly amps up the difficulty. And last but not least, use a heavier trigger. So I primarily shoot Glocks. My competition 34 has about a 3.5 pound trigger on it. So my carry gun, my Glock 19, has about a 5.5 pound trigger on it. It's not a huge difference, but you will definitely see more sight movement when you're pulling the trigger on a slightly or heavier trigger. So by doing so, you'll get better trigger manipulations. Some of the best shooters I've ever seen are guys that primarily shoot revolvers because they're used to a long double action trigger pull. So when they get good at shooting that, anything with a shorter, lighter trigger pull, they're even better. So if you're just getting bored with your dry fire and you want to amp it up a little bit, you can use moving for draws and reloads and all that kind of stuff, all your drills. You can use smaller targets or smaller target zones, or even use hardcover targets where you have a black hardcover, or just put a piece of paper, tape it up over your scale target so that it's a little bit smaller. You can use a smaller gun, so it kind of amps the difficulty up a little bit. And last but not least, use a heavier trigger so you get a little bit more trigger finger discipline and work with it. This has been your Ballistic Minute with Sergeant Bill.
Sergeant Bill Sylvia is a veteran of the Dallas Police Force and a masterclass competitive shooter. You can check out his YouTube videos at armedlutheran.us/Sergeant Bill. It's time for Pastoral Pontifications with Pastor John Bennett.
Hello and welcome to this month's installment of Pastoral Pontifications. This is the Pistol Packing Padre, Pastor John Bennett, and today we're doing something a little bit different. Usually when I do these segments, I try to work in some sort of theology. Sometimes it has very little to do with guns at all. Well, this is one of those segments where everything I say is going to have almost nothing to do with theology. Today I wanted to talk about an incident that took place last November. And it's something we really never talked about on the show because it happened right about the time the show took off for the month of December, for those weeks leading up to Christmas. I'm talking about the school shooting that took place on November 30th in a Detroit suburb at Oxford High School, a shooting that claimed the lives of 4 students, injuring 7 others. Now, as a rule, we don't mention the names of mass shooters here at Armed Lutheran Radio, but I wanted to take the time to say the names of those who were killed. Madison Baldwin, age 17. Hannah St. Juliana, age 14. Justin Schilling, age 17. And Tate Meyer, age 16. What's notable about Tate Meyer is that he was shot while heroically attempting to disarm the shooter. Now, the reason that I'm reflecting on this now is because in the last few weeks, the shooting is once again being talked about in the media, but not because of the trial of the shooter, but that of the parents, which is presently underway. The parents are each charged with 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter. I remember back in early December when this was first being talked about in the media that the parents were going to be charged in relation to the crime. It sparked quite a bit of controversy on social media. There were a variety of talking points that were being thrown about within the pro-Second Amendment community, that it wasn't the parents' fault, this sets a dangerous precedent, and this would only encourage the far-left gun control advocates to push for legislation to normalize a policy of holding parents responsible for the crimes of their children. But as more and more details are coming forth because of the trial, the more I'm agreeing with this decision to place the parents on trial and charge them for the crimes committed by their son. Now, here's what we know so far about the shooter. He was known to have a history of recording videos of himself torturing animals. He literally only had one friend, and that friend moved away 6 months before the shooting. And following his friend moving, he began to struggle greatly with depression. It's also been reported through the process of the trial that the parents frequently left him alone while they stayed out to all hours of the night at local bars, which led to their son being further isolated, all at a time while he is already struggling with depression. Now, leading up to all of this, and this is roughly 8 months prior to the shooting, he told his mother that he had been hearing voices and seeing demons in the house, and in April before the shooting, he had texted a friend that he had told his parents that he was mentally and physically dying. He was clearly disturbed. He clearly needed professional psychological help. And his parents made the decision to buy him a firearm to which he had access. A 15-year-old boy, mentally disturbed, and the parents gift him a firearm. What could go wrong? Now here's where it gets worse. On the morning of the shooting, just hours before their son took the life of 4 of his classmates, the parents were called to the school because of a disturbing drawing their son had made on a piece of homework. Now, while we on the pro-Second Amendment side get quite irate when we hear about kids getting suspended or expelled for drawing pictures of guns or pretending to play shooting games at recess and so forth, this drawing was quite a bit different. In addition to the picture of a gun, there was a drawing of someone who was shot and bleeding. And that may not seem too terrible at this point, but it was the words that were written on the paper that were the most disturbing. These were the phrases that were found on the murderer's homework. The thoughts won't stop. Help me. My life is useless. The world is dead. And blood everywhere. At this point, the school administrator had asked the Crumbleys to take their son home. They refused. They adamantly insisted that he remain at school that day. But by this time, he already had the loaded 6-hour handgun in his backpack. The parents knew he was disturbed. They had purchased him a firearm, and the very day of the shooting, after this meeting at the school where the parents refused to take their clearly disturbed son home with them and get him professional help, after that meeting, when the parents left their son at school, the mother texted a friend saying, "He can't be left alone." Now, it's also worth mentioning that the school district is facing a wrongful death suit because of their failure to act, their failure to protect the school children from this individual who was clearly disturbed. And while the shooter certainly is responsible for his actions and will have to face the consequence for what he has done, in my mind, and this is my opinion, and you are free to disagree with me on this point, but I believe that it is the parents who bear the greatest responsibility for the death of these 4 students. In our Clinging to God and Guns segments, Lloyd and I often talk about shootings and what laws could have prevented such a shooting, and in most every case, the conclusion is that every law that's been put in place was already broken. We've said this ad nauseum that murder is already illegal. In this case, the only reason this kid had access to a firearm is because his parents purchased it for him on Black Friday and gave it to him as an early Christmas gift. Normally, when we hear about kids being gifted firearms, we think that's an awesome thing, that it's a great way to celebrate our freedoms guaranteed by the Second Amendment and pass that appreciation down to the next generation. But for a child who is deeply disturbed, who is clearly suffering from psychological issues, when he's writing messages on his homework like, "The thoughts won't stop, help me, my life is useless, the world is dead, blood everywhere," and the parents learn about this hours before the shooting, and the parents did absolutely nothing, who's responsible? Yes, the shooter, he's responsible for what he has done. That is clear. But in this case, I have to conclude that the parents shared jointly in that responsibility. I'm sure Jennifer and James Crumbly wish they had gotten their son the help that he clearly needed. But it's a little too damn late for that, isn't it? When we take into consideration all the warning signs that were present with this kid, and how the parents failed at every level to be responsible parents and get their son the care he obviously needed, I can only conclude that the parents should and must be held culpable alongside their son. Now, I asked the question just a moment ago, what laws could have been passed which would have stopped this? And the short answer, of course, is none, because you can't outlaw things like stupidity and irresponsibility. Now, there may be some of you who might take issue with this, and this is fine, but I think that there are some steps that can be taken legislatively to help potentially discourage more incidents like this from happening in the future. Now, first, this may sound harsh. I know the objection is going to be that this is some sort of a slippery slope, but the Crumbleys should be made an example of and receive the maximum sentence. Now, why do I say this? It is true they did not pull the trigger, their son did, but they might as well have put the gun in his hand. 15-year-olds can't legally buy a firearm or ammunition, and they knew that he was mentally disturbed. It's the equivalent of giving a pyromaniac a can of gas and a book of matches, then giving him a spiel about fire safety and telling him to behave. By making an example, legally speaking, of parents who do this kind of thing, perhaps this would make other parents think seriously about buying a minor a firearm and then permitting them to have unrestricted access to it. And the second point, while there are already some states that have laws like this, there needs to be a legal standard that lays responsibility on adults who allow minors unsupervised access to firearms. Yes, there are plenty of young kids who are very responsible with their firearms, and they are perfectly capable of using them safely without supervision. I know some kids who are like this, who you could trust them around a gun. You wouldn't have to worry one bit. But on the other hand, a child doesn't have a fully developed prefrontal cortex, that part of the brain that is responsible for making decisions. This is why kids often do what we label stupid stuff. Well, I'm not saying that it should be illegal to allow minors unsupervised access to firearms. If an adult is going to allow this to happen, as a matter of law, they should assume all legal responsibility if that firearm is used unlawfully and unsafely. Now, while this won't necessarily stop shootings, if every time an adult who allowed access to a minor who then goes on a shooting spree is then prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, perhaps this might make gun owners think long and hard before they let Junior have access to his gun. And the third point, while I wish that there was some legitimate way to prevent supremely stupid people from lawfully purchasing and possessing firearms without somehow violating the Second Amendment, let's face it, there really is no reasonable, possible way to stop stupid people from doing stupid stuff with guns. Shall not be infringed means just that. But at the same time, those words were written in an era where 15-year-old boys were fighting for our nation's independence. And sadly, those days are long gone. But is there anything that can be done to encourage more responsible gun ownership in the year 2022, particularly among children? And I believe we can. You think back to years gone by where gun safety was taught in every school, these kinds of shootings were virtually unheard of. So first, we need to bring back teaching gun safety in the classroom. Now, I know that's going to make everybody at the teachers' unions wet their pants, but it needs to be done. You don't isolate a child from something that is dangerous if used irresponsibly, and then scratch your head and wonder, why did this go wrong, when they use a gun irresponsibly the first time they get their hands on it. I think of Derek LeBlanc's Kid Safe program. It's something that should be mandatory nationwide, if you ask me. Our nation spends all sorts of money on stupid programs that don't work. Maybe we could spend a little bit doing something that actually does work. In addition to this, we need to find a way to teach parents how to actually parent their children. What I mean by this is that we need programs that teach parents about the negative psychological impact on their children caused by such things as the excessive use of social media, unfiltered internet access, violent video games and movies, and the like. There has been plenty of research that has demonstrated the damage that this does to children, but some parents think there's absolutely no harm in it. Now, of course, you couldn't force parents to attend a 2-hour seminar on something like this, but I bet if there was an incentive for something like a Walmart gift card, if you went through the whole program, you get parents showing up. Again, just like with the gun safety programs or the Kid Safe program, the government spends all sorts of money on useless stuff. Why not fund something like this that might actually help children and parents? The mantra the gun control crowd uses all the time is that if it will save just one life, it's worth doing. I don't know about you, but if parents were better informed about the risks that modern technology poses for their children, that might just save a whole lot more lives than gun control laws ever have. Well, I've gotten a bit long-winded in this segment. I think that wraps it all for this time. If you have any questions about anything I said, if you have any disagreements with anything I said, I'd be happy to discuss those points in my next segment, so feel free to send any questions or comments or criticisms to me through the feedback page at armedlutheran.us. Christ blessings to you all. We'll talk to you again.
John Bennett is the pastor at St. John's Lutheran Church in Willow Creek, Minnesota. For more information, visit stjohnswillowcreek.org. For show notes, be sure to visit our website at www.armedlutheran.us. Check out the Facebook page, The Armed Lutheran, or join our Facebook group, Fans of Armed Lutheran Radio. If you like what you hear, please leave us a comment on our feedback page at armedlutheran.us/feedback or a review on iTunes and let us know what you think. Thank you for listening to Armed Lutheran Radio, a member of the Self-Defense Radio Network.